All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started. So everyone, welcome to today's Buckeye Bridge series on the arts of Brazil. My name is Jeff Nelson. I work as an education abroad specialist in the Office of International Affairs. And so today I have two of my colleagues with me from across campus who have both led education abroad programs to Brazil, particularly within music and dance. So today we're going to be having a conversation about what music and dance looks like in Brazil, what it was like for them to lead these programs. Both of these faculty members led trips to Salvador, Brazil in particular. So we're excited to share with you about what these programs are like and what it's like to explore the culture and arts of Brazil. So I'm gonna allow my colleagues to introduce themselves and their role at Ohio State. So Crystal, if we want to start with you.
I knew you were going to start with me. I am Crystal Michelle Perkins. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Dance. I am one of two resident directors for OSU Dance's Brazil tour trip with OIA. In the department, I focus on repertory, which is why the OSU Dance Brazil tour trip was so interesting to me. I'm also thinking a lot about the African diaspora in dance, and we're doing that a lot here in the Department of Dance. And so, over the last, I don't know, Jeff, how long has it been? Maybe
About,
four. We are getting ready to start our fourth tour of students. We just took a third this past March on an OSU dance trip to Brazil for our spring break program. We'll talk more about that later, but that's who I am and that's what I do.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Hedgecoth. I'm Associate Director of Music Education in the School of Music. I teach undergraduate courses in teacher preparation and music pedagogy, and I conduct one of our ensembles. And I also lead an education abroad course in Brazilian culture and education to Salvador, Brazil, and Rio de Janeiro. And my research here in Ohio State focuses on charter schools, curriculum, educational change. And the minute we're allowed to travel again, the grant money I have to go back to Brazil will allow me to do a little more research on teaching and learning in music, because it is profoundly different there than it operates here. So we'll probably get into that a little bit later too. So, hello.
All right, so thank you very much for introducing yourselves. So I guess, how did you get involved particularly with programs in Brazil? What kind of led you to that? How did you get interested in it? And after that, can you give a brief description of your program, the things you did, the places you visited, what you learned?
Dave, do you want to go first? I think you've probably been at the OSU tours to Brazil a little bit longer. Okay. That's how dance got drawn into it, if I remember the history.
Well, Jeff's probably heard this, but I owe all this to my mother, because I was going to go to Istanbul, Turkey on vacation several years ago, and she begged me not to go because it wasn't safe. You can't go there. And I thought, well, I'm ready to go on vacation. I guess I'll go to Rio de Janeiro. And to make a very long story very short, I came back from that vacation and said, oh my God, our university must have a musical educational opportunity in the country. And because of our pre-existing connections in Brazil, folks here on campus at Office of International Affairs said, you don't want to go to Rio, you need to go to Salvador. Salvador is the musical heart of the country. And through that exchange, set up our contacts down there in certainly with Clara Ramos and ICR, but with some universities, some schools, high schools. And the scope of the course really encompasses, how students in schools participate in music culture, how do they learn? And we go into different schools and community centers and perform for students. They perform for us, and depending on the year and the instrumentation of our students, we're able to do some combined concerts together. And those are certainly the highlights of where we just kind of collaborate in real time and say, let's make this go. and I should stop there because I could talk a long time and we have many other things to talk about. So
Absolutely. So in dance, we have a 2-week program. And the way that I got drawn into it is I started working at OSU and I had an interest in the African diaspora. The chair at the department of the department at the time, Susan Hadley, had taken the first group. We go every other year to Brazil in our program. So she had already taken the first group. The music program was already going. She was introduced to Clara Ramos, who is our host when we are in Salvador. The program seemed really intriguing for her. And in dance, we had been to China. We have a Denmark program. And so we were really thinking about what changes we could make in the department so that we have a real global aesthetic here. And where could we go to visit and study music and dance? What country could we visit? What culture could we visit that would really share some similar ideas, but would be an interesting kind of international exchange for our students? And at the time, the department was making a real commitment to hiring dance folks who had a real research interest in African diaspora practices, right? Or so like how music and dance is integrated. For me, I think about that work in the American South. And so when I came into the department, she was happy to hand the program over to me because of that kind of Creole nature, the way that culture kind of gets together based on its history, how the music and dance really affect each other, how the people really live. And so she said, here, this program is yours. Another professor had taken students before. And so this past March was my first time taking students. That's how I got drawn into it. But when we're in country, we visit 3 or 4 different cities. We have a chance to perform in cultural exchange. The students give us a gift of something and we give them a gift of something. We try to keep it even that way. But for the students on the Ohio State side, for them, it's really their first opportunity traveling. Many of probably 90% of the students had never been abroad before. And so with each experience, they gain a little something as artists in the world. And I think that that is probably the reason why I'll continue to be involved. I watch them change over a 14-day period in a way that I have not seen in my other travels as undergraduate students. And we are excited about letting that program grow, but that's what we do. We visit a few cities, we perform, we learn, we participate in lectures, we go out and enjoy the culture. That's for dance and music, that is so important, not just to learn in a classroom setting, but to see people doing the dances when they would do them. And so that's kind of what the OSU dance experience is like and why I'm involved.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. So Dave, I believe I've heard you say before that you were comparing Salvador to a city within the United States, and I believe you compared it to like a New Orleans. It's very much kind of the soul of Brazil. So I guess for both of you, so you do spend some time in some other cities throughout Brazil, but a lot of your time is definitely spent in Salvador. So what can you tell me, like what is special about this city? What were maybe some of your first impressions about it?
So I'll say I've been fortunate to go to Brazil several times. I've been, I think, 13 times. Been to Rio, Sao Paulo, Curitiba, Fortaleza. And, just like in the States, every region has its own flavor and vibe. But, when you think about Brazil, you think Sao Paulo is the largest city in the country, one of the largest in the world, and the economic center. So it has that business mindset. I'm not going to say it's cold, but I mean, there's a hustle and a bustle that you get in a New York or Washington, D.C., like everybody's going somewhere business related. Rio to me functions more like a Miami or an LA because it's that coastal iconic vibe and the arts and the outdoor element that makes it just a pleasurable place to be. But in a city to me like New Orleans, or a city in some ways Chicago too, that has just a real story to tell. It's not just economic based. It's not just tourism based. It's just the people and what they do, and they choose to stay there. That's the vibe. My friends in Brazil have always said, if Rio de Janeiro is the heart of Brazil, Salvador is the soul. It's the essence of the country. And to see how music functions in society, to see how um, everyone is a music participant, as opposed to the States, where in often cases, music dance are very highly academic enterprises where, oh, I don't dance or I don't play music. Everyone in Brazil dances. Everyone in Brazil makes music. It's just what you do. It's in the water, it's in the air, it's in the food, it's in their bones. So Salvador, being the third city, really encompasses that soulful element, which I think students from the United States, specifically Ohio, you're taking them out of their central Ohio cornfield. Sorry, it's true. And placing them in some place that is so vibrant, they can't help but learn, even if they're sitting drinking coffee or something else on the street corner. There's learning and culture just permeating everywhere you are.
I would definitely agree. The first thing that I think students notice, and certainly this was my first time going, and so I had an idea of what I thought the cities would be like. And our host, Clara Ramos, I should say it the way she says it, Clara Ramos. I should really get down into it. Really tried to tell me what the difference would be, but you don't really understand it until you're in the city. And the first thing I think about is the pacing, especially as a dancer or mover, that the rhythm of the city is unlike I've ever really experienced. And the rhythm of that city has a kind of invitation, an invitation to be a part, to learn, to share, to sit with. And there's something so beautiful about every engagement that we had. I felt, strangely enough, I felt safe in the work, in a way that students almost felt, I think, too safe traveling without me, right? They wanted to go out into the city in that kind of a way. They felt welcomed. They felt like they could get into the rhythm and really understand the way that things worked as they were traveling. The lusciousness of dance and music that's available in the city is everywhere. There is sound everywhere you go. You can't walk into a shop without hearing it. You can't come down to the lobby of the hotel without hearing it. You want to move your body, you want to move your feet, you want to learn the rhythms, you want to live it, you want to eat it, you want to breathe it, and you don't want to leave. And so that's what Salvador is to me. It's just a very alive kind of place to be. The days feel beautifully long in the city. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone, but I felt like I wanted to get up early, engage in everything that I could engage in, and stay up late. That every moment had a little bit of, like, the way you eat breakfast, the way you say good morning, the way you move into an afternoon, the way that you take a nap in the afternoon before you carry on learning. Care for yourself and for the community and for the culture, all at once. Nothing's left out. It's a really holistic way of experiencing a city. And so for me, that's what Salvador feels like.
Really cool. So you took students there to study music and dance. So what are the arts like in Brazil, particularly Salvador? What were maybe some of the main differences that you experienced between, the United States and Brazil in terms of the arts?
I think the first difference is that it's everywhere. Right, it's not uncommon, and for our students here, and we try to do a little better in this at OSU Dance. I think that we're way ahead of maybe some other departments, and in the way that they think about dance and the scholarly study of dance, but immediately students were talking about that gendered feeling they feel when they're in a dance class, that men in America don't dance, or whatever that whatever that thing is, that dance only belongs to certain people, that you only do it in a dance studio and you only experience it in concert dance. Immediately that was taken away. Everyone dances. Everybody on the spectrum dances. It is for everybody. And that there is kind of history in the body when people are dancing, and there are multiple ways to do it. And so I found that students went from asking very technical questions about dancing. Is it the right foot, left foot, this thing, that thing? And then they began to ask questions about, what ritual does this dance belong to? What people did this dance come from? Why do people do it? What's the essence of the rhythm? What's the spiritual quality of the rhythm? And so we were really thankful to have folks come in and teach us about Orisha culture and where those dances come from, and so that it wasn't kind of separate from the culture. And that is different in terms of how you study dance in the States in the academic setting, right? Or not the way we want it to be different, but that's kind of how they've learned it all these years. And they really have realized that when you're thinking about cultural forms, when you're thinking about the dance of the people, you have to bring all of it with you. And that's the biggest difference I think that they felt and we spent our time doing.
I think Crystal gave the perfect answer in that it's everywhere.
Yeah.
I'll give maybe a mirror to part of that answer, in that it's everywhere. It's absolutely sophisticated and advanced, and almost none of it is in a classroom. And because everyone does it, some of the most sophisticated, amazing musicians that we encountered have such ability, whether it's their voice or with their equipment, and it's all orally based, not on paper. So the pedagogy is fundamentally different. So everyone can access it, as opposed to in the States where it's highly stylized and you got to pass this test, play this scale, learn this piece. And because there's so much overlap between music and dance, everyone can move their bodies in ways that we don't in the States. And I say this as a musician, not as a dancer, but everyone does it and is really, really talented and has such ability and ownership of their oral craft or their physical craft.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference for us, for sure.
Yeah. Dave, my memory of that, I think I noted it in one of my journals as like, this is pedagogy, period, was watching a capoeira gathering in Lençóis, where there were children from like 3 and 4 years old to adults at whatever age. It's really hard to tell how old anybody is in Brazil. I'm not living my life right. To whatever age, but even the structure of that experience, the way that the little ones get around and the music is played and the rhythm of it, and the way that somebody with more physical ability or experience or understanding will get with someone who is 7 or 8 or 10 and teach them in the moment as a part of the ritual, was absolutely incredible for me to watch. And I remember writing, this is pedagogy, this is teaching, this is what we're all really trying to get down to. And somehow there are things in the way of it, but you all just gather around that and someone holds that learning in a way that I just have never seen it. I've never seen it that way before.
Yeah, and it made me think, hearing you talk about Anthony Cozido.
Yeah.
Who's this master dancer and just
Cozido.
stunning human being and amazing. And the very first year I took students, he's leading us through a class, and here are all these Ohio State kids trying to dance and thinking so hard and trying to get it perfect, because that's how we function often, unfortunately. And it wasn't going well. I thought, oh God, this man's going to fire us and we're the ones paying him to do this. And he just said, stop, 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 stop. He goes, stop trying so hard. He goes, stop practicing. Your body is the instrument. So don't think, just do it. And that's one of those powerful teaching moments where I went, oh, wow, this guy's got it figured out. I'm just going to sit in the corner, which is where I belong, and just soak it up.
Just soak it up. Just wait. Yeah. Because, his classes are incredible. His classes are incredible. We studied with Anthony Cozito, with Professor Denilson, who did the Orisha workshops. And for me, there's a lot of Orisha work or capoeira work in American concert dance, particularly because of the influence in hip hop culture. And so a lot of times it's kind of sort of talked about very surface level. And so it was a pleasure to really hear Professor Denilson talk about each movement or each gesture as belonging to trying to make something happen. And he would talk about it in the same way, right? That there's such a kind of energy behind it that you can't practice it. You have to do it. You can't just sort of like hope you'll get it exactly right. That there has to be kind of a spirit or rhythmic joy to the thing. And I did the same thing. I just stood back and I said, well, I'll let them teach and I'll go over here and learn a bit myself. And that's another thing I think that's great about these programs is that I know that each time I go, I will learn something new. And it's research for me as well,
And Jeff, I know you have all these questions you have to ask us, and we're totally sabotaging your agenda. Sorry about that, but Crystal and I are just going to keep talking, buddy. Is that for our students, and I know we have some people zooming in today and listening, they're not really given the option, right? Like, and here we plan and everything's crafted and check your syllabus and da-da-da-da-da. We make sure everybody, and we share and care and make sure everybody's in a good place. There, it was just like, okay, we're doing this. No one really asked them, do you feel like doing this? No, you're doing it. So they're not only are they out of their comfort zone because they're in a different hemisphere, in a different continent, and their Portuguese is bad at best, right? I mean, they're struggling, we're mediocre, but they're in this environment where they just make it happen. And so their learning curve and their ability to adapt and expand and try and do is profoundly accelerated. And I think I'm getting to probably one of your other questions, Jeff. You're welcome. Is that these students come back profoundly different in their approach to either music making, I would assume, into dance, into social interactions, into I'll even use the term resiliency and courage, like, okay,
certainly,
as opposed to the constant prep I think we often fall into here. It's okay, I'll say it, it's magical because that's what it is.
It is. It is.
How did you prepare your students for, this very different experience? So I know, like Crystal, you were saying the majority of your students hadn't even been out of the country before.
Right.
So like, how did you, like both of your programs, you kind of have some preparation time before you go. So how did you, maybe help begin to open students' mind to like the different things they would experience, the different styles of music and dance?
Well, we think about the program as a touring program. I'm going to change your question a little bit. How did I think I was preparing them? And then I'll tell you what we did. But there are just certain things you cannot prepare for if you've never been out of the country. And there are certain things that you can't prepare for if you've never experienced a particular culture at all. One of the things that we do to prepare is rehearse, because the main focus of the OSU dance program is a tour. So we learned different dances to set up our lecture demonstration, and through those dances, we talked about Brazilian culture. They also took a class in the Portuguese department on Brazilian culture and history, and that was new to us this year. That was really exciting because they had an opportunity to kind of not slowly learn and understand the culture, but to really understand it from someone who understands it more than I understand it, right? And I think that that's important. I think that our students really need to do that. They study a little bit of language. I don't think enough. That's one of the changes we want to make in the coming years. We've got to learn more Portuguese heading into the country, but they rehearse Tuesday through Friday, 2.5 hours a day to prepare the lecture demonstration. Jeff came in and gave us some pre-departure trips. I re-gave those same seminars about how to travel and how to travel safely. We talked about what it meant to have your passport and keep it on you. I mean, there's sort of kind of like mundane things about traveling abroad that students really needed to know so that they felt safe while traveling and understood what the program's goals were. But when we got in country, it didn't all fall away, but I could not prepare them for how malleable they needed to be. In Western culture, it's like 1 o'clock on the dot, right? If you're not there 15 minutes early, you're late. And so I couldn't prepare them for what might have been frustrating for them in the first couple of days. Schedules will change. We will stay longer at dinner in order to have a more impactful experience. We won't do all 32 of the dances we brought because we've arrived into their community and they want to share something with us. So we're only going to share one idea, even though we came with all of this in tow. And those are the things that are a little hard to prepare people for who've grown up in a certain kind of culture that centers, what we want to do and where we want to go and what this tight schedule is. And so one, yes, they were prepared to travel safely. They had all of their pre-departure meetings and they were prepared to perform, but I couldn't prepare them for how malleable they needed to be, how go with the flow they needed to be. And I brought back students on the back end who were go with the flow, malleable, much more mature, ready to shift gears, could understand when it was important to stay and stick with something and when it was time to move. And so that was our experience.
A lot of parallels there.
Yeah.
Crystal uses the term malleability. I use the term super chill. And I tell the students over and over, because I've done it different ways, different years. I've had a 2-week class, I've had a 10-day class, I've done a 5-day class, just modifying everything to see what's the best mix to prepare students for this epic adventure, really. But I say from the very first day, I mean, there are going to be things where you're not comfortable, where you're hot, where you're tired, where you're frustrated, as in any travel experience. And we need to layer on top of that, the food will be different, the weather will be different. You will have some traveler's anxiety because you won't comprehend conversations.
Yeah.
So you have to work to know thyself, that when you're getting anxious or grumpy, just hear Hedgecoth's words. I need to be super chill right now and just ride the wave, because eventually you will get dinner. It will be climate controlled. You will get to go to the beach. You will get things you need. And also preparing them mentally. And I think there's some social skills involved here too, that, if you have to have that special Starbucks every morning, well, you're not going to get that. So you need to be prepared to say bye-bye to Starbucks every morning. You're not going to have your special pillow if you need your special pillow. And, if you're glued to your device, you might not get perfect Wi-Fi in Brazil, because that's just how things roll. So rather than going there, making sure you have everything how you need, you should go there understanding nothing's going to be the same. And how can you establish some comfort and functionality? And then after a day or two, ability to thrive and be resilient in that culture. I think has been really helpful. like Crystal said, the language thing. One year I didn't do much language, and I paid the price. The students struggled, and that was a stressor for them. This past 2 years ago now, we did language prep before departure, but also had language classes while we were there so they could apply it immediately. And they got their hands around and minds around a little bit more. Um, so that was a big benefit. And at least for us, what I try to do is kind of do a layer of Brazilian history and then layer upon that the evolution and musical story of Brazil, which starts, very Western European and not Brazilian, but then evolves into this fascinating hybrid of European, African, and indigenous sound and timbres, which we think, oh, that's Brazilian music, but it's really a rich mix. It's like everything's mixed in the pot, but you can still see the different elements within the stew, so to speak. So the identities are there, but people call it Brazilian music very cannibalistic because it's taken other things and created this Brazilian element. So we do a history part, and then each day in the class, the students would have different assignments to speak on either an event or a location where we would be. So they would have some context information about where they were or what they were engaging with. And then I gave them some self-exploration assignments. What were they interested about the country? And of course, they're interested about samba, right? They're interested about the city. If we think politics in the States are a mess, Brazil is a whole nother level, and they found that interesting, as well as the racial disparities and the socioeconomic disparities that exist in the country and how that's in some way a mirror against the United States. They explore those too. So just to get them ready so there's not too much culture shock has always been my goal, so we can sort of hit the ground running. So
okay. So you both alluded to some of these already, but while you both have led programs in Brazil, you did different workshops and master classes. Were there any other ones that you did, and what were special about some of these workshops, and how did they add to your program?
Trying to think which one is most special. They're all so special. I think Clara Ramos really has an excellent community that she's introducing us to in Salvador. One of the I'll talk about one of the experiences I pushed back on because I'm not a nature person. And it took so many hours to get there, but it's so worth it. And it is the experience I talk most about. We went out to the national park, which takes it feels like 6 hours to get to on a small bus, and it's a little rocky getting there. And then you spend like an hour climbing up a mountain. And Clara Ramos is doing it in flip-flops and the cell phone, and I am like hanging onto the mountainside for dear life. And I noticed that going up the mountain. And then, but when we get to the top of the mountain, the guide shares folklore with us about the country, and you can see the entire countryside. You can see the forest. You can see what we're talking about when we're talking about climate change. You are with the people we're talking about who will be affected most as the earth shifts. And then we climb down the mountain and we travel a little bit longer, and we go to the bottom of the earth to walk through a cave. And I just am not, as a dancer, I'm physical, but not in this way. So there's sort of like a lot of hiking. And so we go to this cave. And again, we hear the stories of the people, and we get to see the bottom of the earth. And I'm standing in the cave, and I'm thinking about how fragile this ecosystem really is, and how the world is really very much bigger than we are. And the students are thinking the same things. So we get through that, and we finish the day. This is a long and beautiful day at the bottom of a waterfall, which I have never done and to kind of just like play in nature all day, and for that to be a thing that Clara is like, you have to do this. You have to get to know the people who are not in the city of Salvador, who live out in the countryside. What does the rest of the population look like? What does music look like in the countryside? What does dance look like in the countryside? How do we build relationships with them and keep coming? And so it gave the group, the day in itself, from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the cave to underneath the waterfall, gave the group an opportunity to talk about Brazil as a country outside of music and dance, which really sort of sounds odd, right? But as the country itself, the actual earth that it sits on. And to have that experience it's really inexplicable, to know that there was a time that Salvador maybe was covered in the same way, covered with trees, not, that it was countryside. And so our students had a lot of conversation about where do we go from here with all of the kind of contemporary concerns we have about art and culture. What is our responsibility? And that's how we spent the day bonding as a group. And so that's one of the most memorable experiences outside of the lectures that we had.
That was good. That was good. I would have to say the opportunities when we give little mini concerts at the two elementary schools where here are a bunch of Ohio States coming in, students coming in, we're going to give a concert, and there's, anywhere from 10 to 50 little 7 to 9-year-old Brazilian students looking at us because some of them haven't seen folks from America, and our students are nervous because none of the children are talking to them. Why would they? And then the evolution of from the concert and performing and the students following along and engaging with us. And we would always do some arts and crafts with the students at the end of the concert to see the students open up and to see their genuine personalities and how just friendly and kind and energetic and passionate even the children are to interact with people they just met. I think there's a transfer there just to the Brazilian people in general to being so giving. And at every concert, it always would start with like, okay, this is our performance. But then in the van on the way home, it was actually very little about the performance, but more of the interaction and the experience to where here's a van full of Ohio State students in tears because they were so moved by just the powerful experience of connecting with people. Music was the gateway, but then the social interaction and the creating of arts and crafts together was a pretty potent experience. And then I'd have to say, the years that we've gone, we always have a finale concert, our last night typically, and where we've worked hard and we sometimes bring in students from one of the neighborhoods that are musicians and perform with us. And it's usually an incredible experience because our students are now, yeah, they're exhausted, but they're emotional because they've experienced so much. I think they have a little wider window into who they are and what the world is and what America is, that these countries look at each other, that those finale concerts are usually, again, good musical events, but profoundly emotional because of the interpersonal connections people have made in 10 days. And, knowing that some of these people are still in contact. So it's not just a, hey, bye, but it's a sustained engagement that is lasting and has a big impact.
Yeah,
for sure. It's not the beach. The beach is nice, not the beach.
we haven't talked about the beach very much. Clara changed our trip a little bit and let us spend a couple of days at a little beach resort right in the middle. And it was the first time, and when I say that this is a beach resort, it's not like I know it. Like in the States, the beach resort is like way far back from the coast, right? Like there's a lot of land. This house was right on the ocean. like it sort of made you a little nervous that if the tide rose a little too high, the house would be in the ocean. And so the first night we were there, the folks who looked after the inn said, come, 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 the moon is rising. And it took me just like, I was like, there, the moon rises. That's the thing you can, that's a thing you can watch. And so everybody who's in this beach resort, we're all standing on the tiny lawn on the, you know, on the outside of the house. And you could feel the gravitational pull of the moon and the tide. It's like I'd never been that close to the part of the earth where you could feel the entire ocean shift because of that. It was an incredible experience. I recorded it, but of course, video recordings don't have actual weight, don't have actual weight to them, but the sound of the water pulling back, the sound of the tide rising, you could literally feel the earth tilt. Those are the kinds of experiences you have in Salvador, because it's not like living here in Ohio at all. I mean, you live literally at a different kind of longitude and latitudinal space, right, on the earth. And their experience with weather, their experience with planetary motion, the way that their day runs, all of that is in the rhythm. I think what I'm trying to say is that all of that is in the rhythm of the place. All of that's in the rhythm of the place, and it's part of the way that they experience things. So next time, Dave, we'll have to go to the beach together so you don't miss the moon rising.
Yeah, can you tell us a bit more about like performances that you did? You know, what types of music and dances you do? You know, what types of venues did you perform in? And, you know, do you have maybe a favorite performance that you did while you were there?
I've had a big learning curve because my first year, I thought, okay, we're going to do some American tunes, we're going to do some Brazilian tunes, it'll be fun. And then I got there and realized, oh, David, you made a cultural mistake, pal. Because why and who do I think I was to pull out some Brazilian tunes thinking that we can play samba better than the Brazilians can, right? So it was tricky. At the same time, you know, they want to hear some of their music. Of course they do. And they want to hear some music that's, you know, specific to the United States. And we've played, depending on who's in the class, we've played, you know, 80s rock stuff. We played plenty of classical things. We've played Aquarela de Brazil, Girl from Ipanema, things that are identifiable. Various students have done their own solos, classical or modern, some small ensembles perform. So I program the music to be very flexible and elastic. So, okay, in this performance, we're going to do these 4 things. That's all we have time for. Or we'll do these 7 sets, and some of our Brazilian friends will play in the middle with their stuff. So it's kind of like a sampler platter of a concert, really, depending on where we are, the venue, the age of the students, indoor, outdoor, what's the acoustics like? I mean, do people really want a concert or they just want to hang out? We just got to have that flexibility. That's been the big thing. And the best part for sure, as I mentioned earlier, is the shared concert experience, to where all of our students and then our Brazilian counterparts were all performing together, or we're all on stage together. And you know, some of our students, you know, with a jazz background will do a lot of improv, and some Brazilian students will be right with them doing the same thing. And that's the special moment to go, oh man, we didn't plan this. This just happened. And suddenly I'm recording it and my eyes are dripping, and this is a great thing. So it's pretty cool.
I don't know if I have a favorite. The first performance probably set the tone, and for us that was in Lençóis, which again is outside of Salvador. It took us a little while to get there. One of the most beautiful towns I have ever been in. I could stay there forever. But we performed in kind of an outdoor courtyard on cobblestone. the cobblestone is really not even. It's been there for centuries. And it's not like dancing on the Mershon stage or in our theater in the Barnett where the floor is sprung and to all of our union rules about dancing. This was a shock for the students, not so much for me. I come out of a touring company, so I was very excited to watch them kind of manage it a little bit to figure out how they would perform. But I remember when the performance started, there weren't a lot of people around, but as soon as the music started and the program began to flow, it almost called the entire town to the performance. And that's what I was kind of alluding to when I said things start at 1 o'clock. We really had to learn that sometimes that the energy of dance is what called people to the performance. It was the same thing in the schools. We visited several schools. I think we had 3 or 4 performances in schools at all ages and levels. And sometimes it would just be for maybe the lower grades. But as soon as the music started again, it would call, people could not stay in their classrooms. We always had much more activity around our performance than we thought that we would. We take a program that is about breaking down the relationship of African Americanness to music and dance from different vantage points. We have a body percussion piece, which is what we call, you may know it as step here on campus, like that comes out of the HBCU tradition of fraternities and sororities. We take a capoeira influence piece because that's in some of my work. And that's that thing that Dave, I think you're talking about when you're saying they want to hear some of their music, but I don't want to do it the way they do it because they do it, that's what they do, right? And so I made a little work that kind of influenced around the ideas of contemporary dance, but they appreciated seeing it. That was one of the notes that as we travel, there's a fine balance that you have to make in the programming you take that appreciates the culture, doesn't appropriate the culture, right? And it's very hard to do. And that's what we spend our time rehearsing and thinking about. We also took a traditional African piece, working with some community partners here in Columbus. And I think that's another turn of the program, is that we really want to understand that there is culture in Columbus that's connected to this international community we want to connect to. And so how do we bring choreographers in or master classes to help prepare students? And so that's what our program is about. And we can't always do all of it. It's about an hour long and we don't always have that kind of time. But one of the most special performances was with the students in the training program, because we finished that performance with a conversation. And our students had a chance to talk to students who are about the same age and starting into pre-professional dance. They are training in the same ways. And just to witness the open and honest conversations they were having about politics, about culture, about getting work. They all had the same concerns. And I remember that the Brazilian students thought this can't be, like their understanding of what they think American artists are doing versus what's actually happening was a learning curve, and also vice versa. Our understanding of what we thought dance artists are doing in Brazil and what they have access to is not what we thought it was. And so they talked for about an hour and a half post-performance about the way they wanted to change the world. And that to me is what's really special about the program. And they exchange numbers and they still talk.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
All right, so I do have one final question, but for those of you watching, if you just maybe had a quick question that you wanted to put in the Q&A box, while I ask this last question, you can go ahead and do that. But so, I mean, it's been a pretty evident theme throughout both of you talking just how much passion and enthusiasm you have for your programs. So maybe just in a few sentences, if possible, why should students consider going to Brazil? Why should they consider doing an education abroad program?
I have four things that I say when I promote this class, because people think, oh, I want to study abroad. I want to go somewhere, I want to go to Europe, or I want to go to Australia, or all these things. And Americans have a tendency to look east or west, right? We look left or right in regard to travel a lot of the time. We don't look south. And I think we don't see this massive continent and world that is South America, and often it's not on our radar. And the thing I say to promote this class is that if you're looking for a cultural experience, a musical experience, an educational experience, and a profoundly personal experience, this particular country in Salvador, and even more specific, provides you with all of those things to be a better global citizen, have deeper understanding of how the world works, to have, at least for music students, a profoundly different paradigm of how music is learned and valued that inevitably reshapes your own values of music and learning. This is the class for you. And I wish I could take all the credit, but I think Crystal would agree. A lot of the credit goes to Clara for setting up a fantastic opportunity and showing the best of her city and state to American students, and to constantly work to craft that. And I think in conjunction, we're able to deliver something to the students that's um, it's not the Louvre, right? It's not Buckingham Palace. We're not in Sydney Opera House, and it's not meant to be any of those things. Those are apples and oranges. This is something absolutely once in a lifetime, one location only, and unlike anything else, and just as special in its own right.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
I don't have very much to add to that, but I'll share something. I really think the reason to go to study abroad, whether it's the Brazil programs or some other program that's not going to Europe, if you think about the landmass, I think Europe only covers something like 5%. And something like 90% of all study abroad programs go to Europe. But we talk about wanting to change the world or shift the world or find our place in the world, right? These are things that we say, these are like buzz sentences, but you cannot change a world that you have not seen and you don't have any concept of. You can't find a place in a world that you don't understand. And so for me, traveling to Brazil is about reorienting what I think the world looks like, right? What I've been taught in an American kind of education academic system and what the world actually looks like. And there are millions of people who do not live on that 5% of the world that kind of has all of the power and attention. And so when you're choosing a study abroad program, choose Brazil because we want you to go, but choose somewhere outside of that 5%, so that you can really figure out what it is you're trying to change and where it is that you're trying to be, so you can get an honest picture of what we look like today and the changes that need to take place.
That was, yeah, very true. Yeah, so I do not see any questions coming in. So I just want to take this time to say thank you to both of you. It's a pleasure to work with you both. And I hope that someday soon I can get you back on that plane to go to Brazil.
I hope we can get you on the plane to come with us to Brazil.
Change your life, bro. Change your life.
Sounds good. But for those of you watching, thank you for tuning in to the session on the arts of Brazil. If you are interested in studying abroad sometime during your time at Ohio State and would like to learn more information or set up an appointment with an advisor, you can please email abroadadvisor@osu.edu, and we'd love to help you out. But thank you all for coming today.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.